From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday, July 17th, 2023, as we bring you a new episode. Major League Baseball trade deadline is just 15 days away, and while we haven't seen any major activity yet, it does seem to be clearer who the sellers could be in the next 15 days. At the moment, the top starting pitcher available in the market is the White Sox, Lucas Giolito. He's going to make his next start on Tuesday against the New York Mets. But in this episode, I've identified 8 teams that I think could use Giolito the most. We'll break that list down later in the show. Plus, another team is interested in Lance Lynn's services, and we'll preview the Mets series later in the show. But first, the Chicago White Sox went into Atlanta and won that series. Kind of incredible how that happened. Joining me to pay attention to the details is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And Jim, I hope you are prepared for tonight's episode. It's imperative that we have a strong sense of urgency addressing how the White Sox played in Atlanta might be strengthening the foundation of a winning culture. I think I got all the buzzwords in, right? Am I missing any of them?
Oh, only one game to flush.
Only one game to flush.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, 2 games to savor. So it's weird when you get to the point in the season where they're just about out of it, and there is some value in knowing the White Sox are out of it, but then they play like 2 enjoyable games, like Saturday beating Spencer Strider, back and forth affair. White Sox played good defense. The Braves did not, and that made the difference. Like, that was nice to see and enjoyable. And then, Sunday was the game they should have won when you're looking at the pitching matchups, Dylan Cease versus Colby Allard, but we've seen the White Sox lose C starts before. He had 8 straight no decisions. We've seen them disappoint time and time again when he's on the mound. So to win that game and going away, also enjoyable. So it's a long season. There are a lot of weeks left, a lot of series left. If the White Sox make some trades, there will be a lot of probably flat and bad and under-equipped baseball. So I'm enjoying the White Sox looking like a major league team while they still have major league players.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that they did not take care of business in Oakland, and they most definitely did not take care of business in the homestand, because despite winning this series, the White Sox are 4-7 in the month of July.
Yeah.
Maybe the tone would be different if they were 7-4 this month, but they are 4-7, and 2 of those 4 wins are against the best team in Major League Baseball. But again, that's baseball sometimes. The Atlanta Braves now have lost the series to the Oakland Athletics and the Chicago White Sox. After this season, they'll look back at those series and laugh and be like, oh, what crazy weekends those were. But the Atlanta Braves are still a very, very good team.
Trap games.
Traps
for what? Given their lead in the division, it doesn't really matter. But it's, last week we were talking about how the White Sox suck, and on the season they do, but I think since May, they're mediocre. They're not bad, but you also can't discount April. So, when you look at their whole season, they suck. When you look at since May, they're mediocre, which means they can beat good teams once in a while. Then they turn in, terrible series like they did against Oakland. They don't rise to the occasion, or they don't win the winnable series. So this is who they are, which is occasionally competent and occasionally infuriating. And you just shrug and say, well, see if they actually learn their lessons, and probably not. But until the White Sox make some changes at the front office level, but there are weeks to go. May as well enjoy the good baseball until game 162, and then you'll hope that some sea changes are in the offing come October.
Offensively, the guys had good series. Luis Robert, he went 5 for 12 in this series. He hit a home run on Sunday. That's the 27th of the season. He drove in 5 RBIs. The last 30 games for Luis Robert Jr., folks, he has an OPS over 1,000. It's 1,049 to be specific. He is red hot, continues to be red hot after the All-Star break. Great to see that. Jake Berger was 3 for 11 in the series, but he hit 2 home runs. One home run on Saturday that gave the White Sox the lead. That was an impressive home run, taking a 100-mile-per-hour fastball in the outside corner from Spencer Strider and going oppo taco. He's got 21 in the season now. Tim Anderson, he went 4 for 12 with a walk, so he reached base 5 times. That's good for him. And Andrew Benintendi, 7 for 14 this weekend with 4 RBIs. In Benintendi's last 30 games for the White Sox, he's hitting .322 with a .388 on base percentage, slugging .426, while the slugging percentage is not impressive because the on base percentage is carrying the OPS of .814 over the last 30 games. This is the type of performance that the White Sox were hoping that they'd be getting from Andrew Benintendi when they signed him to the largest free agent contract. So if Benintendi can stay hot, and if Robert can stay hot like this, and if Tim Anderson can be a little productive, continuing to hit between the two of those guys, then yeah, there's going to be some nights the White Sox surprise us and they score 5 or 6 runs against the best teams in baseball. And some nights it's going to look like Friday where they're just lifeless. So that's just how it is right now with the White Sox.
Yeah, it's Benintendi, I think, makes a big difference at the top of the order. And if Tim Anderson can just be like not infuriating batting second, just the thought process behind it, and get some innings to Robert where he can do some damage. But yeah, looking at Jake Berger having some moments helped. Guys who you can maybe think could be part of a next offensive core. If the White Sox, if this current roster that the White Sox have is more or less disassembled by the trade deadline and then by free agency and opt out and option decisions at the end of the season that just more or less take apart like 40% of the roster. There's like a core here to where like you don't need a full blown rebuild to get back to respectability, but it does require talent evaluation along the way to fill in those gaps that the White Sox keep getting sunk by. Second base, right field, etc. Not being able to develop like a catcher who could step in for Yasmani Grandal's 4th year for a 4-year contract for a catcher in his mid-30s. You have to count on that last year being unproductive, and the White Sox just couldn't quite bridge that gap. So there are some spots to turn over, but Robert should be there. Benintendi should be there. Like there are spots where you can function. So that's why it's not a complete loss. Whereas like if Elvis Andrus were driving the train or if Zach Remelard's, hot streak was still going on, then you could more or less shrug and say like, I don't know about this team. Or know about their future. But yeah, Benintendi, Robert, Colas, Berger, like those are 4 to where like there's kind of an offense here, but just requires hitting on more than the White Sox have hit on before.
Hey, let's not discredit Elvis Andrus. He did hit a double on Sunday, and the steak dinner bet is still alive, Jim. So I need you to tone down.
Yeah, as long as he's not DFA'd.
Yeah, I need you to tone down your rhetoric on Elvis Andrus. Moving over to Lance Lynn. Lynn made the start on Saturday against Spencer Strider. A tough assignment against the best offense in Major League Baseball. Lance Lynn went 5 1/3 innings, allowed 6 hits, 4 earned runs. He walked 3, he struck out 6. And then on Sunday in Bob Nightingale's USA Today Sunday column, Bob had this note regarding Lance Lynn and the Tampa Bay Rays, that the Tampa Bay Rays have engaged in trade talks with the White Sox about Lance Lynn, but the White Sox asking price remains steep for Lynn. They being the Rays, have also been extensively scouting the Cardinals starting pitchers Jordan Montgomery and Jack Flaherty. So the Rays are looking to add starting pitchers, and they're kicking the tires on Lance Lynn. So that's 2 teams now. We have the Texas Rangers and the Tampa Bay Rays. If you didn't get a chance to watch or be part of the watch party that we had on playback with our friends Chirizi and Beeflo from the 108 on Sunday while watching the White Sox beat the Atlanta Braves, we had this conversation, but I wanted to bring it into this podcast, Jim. Is there enough trade fire to take this trade smoke seriously regarding Lance Lynn? As in, Lynn's time with the White Sox could end within the next 15 days.
I think so, just because like specific to the teams in question, Rays, Rangers, like they can use innings. And I think like Lynn's start against the Braves was representative of his stock. Like he gave him 5 1/3. It wasn't pretty. Lefties hurt him. Albies got a triple off him. Rosario got a homer. Matt Olson had a single off him. Also struck out on a pitch clock or pitch timer violation, not engaging with him at 8 seconds. So that kind of bailed him out a little bit. But, he's weak against lefties, but good against righties. And a team like the Rays, which is used to covering for pitcher shortcomings, and just needs innings, needs anybody who can turn in a respectable 5 or 6. Like, he seems like a good enough fit. I think the question, we had with the Rangers and with the Rays is like, are the White Sox asking for too much, or are the Rays asking for like, we'll pay for him? And that's about it. Like, we'll cover his salary, but we're not interested in like giving up guy of actual potential value, even if they do have some like prospects down their list who are like 25, 26, probably won't play many meaningful games or pitch meaningful innings for the Rays and could be had. Like, it strikes me as like there's a down system fit for the White Sox, but if they're still in the market of like, whoa, Flaherty's still there, Montgomery, other guys who can contribute innings, not great innings, like there's a healthier market for that to where like they can try to wait out the White Sox for Lynn. And then maybe if July 28th, 29th, 30th comes around and they haven't found their innings guys and the Orioles have caught up to them entirely, like then it might be like, okay, we'll give you number 20 prospect for him or something like that, versus like we'll pay full freight and that's more or less it. Player to be named later. None of those players are interesting. I think that's kind of my interpretation of where the talks might be right now because of just how many Lance Lynn types there are. But maybe by the end of July, Lynn will be more appealing because like all the talks are the same, in which nobody wants to blink too early, knowing that, all it takes is one more pitcher injury, like say the Guardians losing Shane Bieber, to where like all of a sudden Lynn becomes theoretically interesting to them too, if they're looking to contend. So lots of, there are lots of pitchers like Lynn, but there are also lots of teams that can use a pitcher like Lynn who can help without sacrificing like a major part of their farm system for somebody who may not work out.
Lynn's next probable start for the White Sox is on the road Friday night against the Minnesota Twins in Minneapolis. And then after that, his next probable start at home would be against the Cleveland Guardians during that 4-game series after the 2-gamer against the Chicago Cubs. Does Lynn make it back to Chicago in a White Sox uniform, Jim?
I think so. Although, like, I have speculated before that, like, Lance Lynn and Bob Nightingale are kind of close to where, like, just because he was a source on La Russa stories and kind of a go-to guy for Nightingale for, like, veteran quotes. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if like Lynn's saying like, or Lynn's agent's like, help him get out of here, to where, maybe there is something to it. But I still think that the market for him will develop more slowly than it will for like Lucas Giolito, who like is somebody who, if the Dodgers got him, a team like the Rays or the Reds might be like, crap, he could have really helped us. I think he's more of a difference maker that might make the market act sooner.
What a great segue to our next topic, Jim. Bravo. Well done. Setting the stage. Excellent job, sir. Paying attention to details.
It's almost like we podcasted together. Yes.
Yes. Our next topic is Lucas Giolito. We're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about Lucas Giolito here, because while doing some research over the weekend, and I appreciate the White Sox not starting Giolito over the weekend because it gave me this extra time to do this type of research, I came up with the list of what I think is the 8 best trade fits for Lucas Giolito. These are 8 teams currently in contention, and I think will remain in contention somewhat. But I think these are the 8 teams that could use Lucas Giolito the most, where I think Giolito would have the biggest impact. And a reminder of how Lucas Giolito is faring. And again, he'll be making his next start Tuesday night in Queens against the New York Mets. In 2023, Lucas Giolito has made 19 starts. He has over 112 innings pitched. His ERA is 3.45. He's got 117 strikeouts to 34 walks. His ERA plus, which you could find this on Baseball Reference, is 127. So Giolito's 27% above league average. His WAR totals, from the difference between Baseball Reference and Fangraphs is pretty significant. On Baseball Reference, eye-opening, it's 2.9, so almost a 3 WAR pitcher already for Lucas Giolito. But on Fangraphs, where they use FIP, Giolito's at 1.7 for the season, which is still good. He's got some work to do to get to 3 WAR on the season, where on Baseball Reference, Giolito might end up being a 4.5 WAR type of starting pitcher in 2023. But I'm focusing, Jim, on ERA plus as a guide to help compare on how Giolito is faring in 2023 and where he could possibly slot in for contending teams. So I'm looking at other teams' starting rotations, filtering on ERA plus, where could Giolito fit? Because there's been a lot of conversation, especially on social media, that people are thinking that Giolito would be at best a contending team's number 3 starter. But as we go through this list, I disagree with that notion. I think for some of these rotations, Giolito would be the second best starter that they have, especially just looking at 2023 performance. And for a short period, might be their number 1 starter until some guys get healthy. So before we get started with the top 8 list, do you agree with me as far as in that notion that Lucas Giolito does have quite a bit of value and he could be more than just like a number 3 or number 4 starter for other teams?
He does. I think like when it comes to value, I think maybe where teams would differ is what they think he could do in the postseason. I think over the course of a 162 game season, he's very valuable because like not only does he have the 120 plus ERA plus going for him and like very good run prevention skills, and he seems to have figured out like how to. He seems to have fully adjusted from like being the fastball changeup guy with an occasional slider to being somebody who can be slider first if he has to be. I can see him being like a very valuable pitcher over the course of like 162 games. But like when they're looking at starters who can go like a dominant 5 and get the game in the bullpen, do they think he can be that guy? And do they have enough guys who can provide a dominant 5 to where like getting that 6th and 7th inning doesn't matter so much? Which is, I think, where Giolito provides that value for throwing 180 innings. That's, I think, where you might see teams say, like, we could do better, or we get more of a strikeout monster, even if he is, like, inefficient. Like, say, like, what Dylan Cease is doing this year. Like, we might like Dylan Cease more because come playoff time, and we'll be in the playoffs, we just want bat missing more than somebody who's good at working through lineup multiple times in a fairly efficient manner. So that's kind of how I see it, but overall, like, yeah, I think he's back to where he was. Maybe not like at his peak, but very good. And a pitcher like that would fit comfortably within teams' top 3s.
So we're going to start in reverse order. So we're going to start with number 8 on the list, building our way up to number 1. And number 8 on the list, I have the San Francisco Giants. They're currently 52-41. They're 1.5 games back of the Los Angeles Dodgers in the National League West. They are currently the number 5 seed in the National League as they have a half-game lead over the Arizona Diamondbacks. Giants, what a run. On May 31st, they were 500. They are 28-28, 5.5 games back. Since June 1st, the Giants are 24-13. And leading their rotation is Alex Cobb. He's got a 1.45 ERA plus that might surprise people. And Logan Webb has a 1.34 ERA plus. Why do I have the Giants on this list? Cobb and Webb are the Giants' only 2 above average starting pitchers. And there's some injury issues that the Giants are going through with their starting rotation. And I feel like if the Giants were to jump into the Giolito pool here and they acquired Giolito, that would help solidify their starting rotation and walking into the postseason with an Alex Cobb that's pitching really well this year. We know Logan Webb could be quite a big strikeout artist. That Cobb, Webb, and Giolito, that's not bad, especially in a 3-game series, Jim.
Yeah, I think they're the kind of team to where it gets to the heart of the discussion of like, do they feel like Cobb and Webb are enough? And then when you get to game 3, do they want somebody like Giolito who can maybe go 6 or 7, or do they just want to piece together 1 or 2 times through at most and then get to the bullpen? And that's, I think, where the philosophical divide comes in. They're one of the teams I'm thinking about in terms of like feeling good about their 1 and 2 and then getting to game 3, like crossing that bridge when they get to it.
Yeah. And they got to get to the 3-game series before you get to the 5-game series. And then in a 5-game series, you got to get to a 7-game series. I don't think the Giants are built well right now to win a 7-game series in the postseason. They could scare some teams, though, especially in that 3-game series. And I know I didn't think highly of the San Francisco Giants before coming into this season, but here they are. They've been playing great baseball since June 1st, and they are breathing down the necks of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they just leaped the Arizona Diamondbacks in the National League West standing. So the Giants are having a very surprising 2023 season. That's why I have them 8th on the list. Adding Giolito along with Webb and Cobb, I think, helps solidify the front end of their rotation. Number 7, I have the Houston Astros. Now, as we are recording this, the Astros are playing the Angels of Sunday Night Baseball, and the last time I checked, the Astros were losing that game. So the Astros, depending on how that game shakes out, are either going to be 51-43 or 52-42. So they're going to be behind the Texas Rangers. They're either 3.5 games back or 4.5 games back of Texas. Since June 1st, the Astros have been hovering around 500, and they have not made up any ground on the Texas Rangers. And when you look at their starting rotation, Framber Valdez, obviously one of the best pitchers in the American League. He's got a 1.51 ERA+. You may not know who J.P. France is, but he's having a solid season for the Astros. He's at a 1.26 ERA+. Then there's Christian Javier and Hunter Brown, which they had some hype coming into the season, but both those guys have been hovering around league average. So I have the Astros on this list, Jim, because I think you can count on, at least Dusty Baker, Lucas Giolito, to be more confident in him to be the number 2 guy than the unknown in JP France and the young guys in Christian Javier and Hunter Brown. Javier and Brown had big postseasons last year for the Astros, so you could be flexible pitching these guys out of the bullpen. But I think for the Astros, which are struggling a little bit to catch the Texas Rangers in the National League West, I feel like they could use another starter in that same Nine-Gale column. Nine-Gale's reporting that the Astros are already talking to the Chicago Cubs about a possible Marcus Stroman trade. So it looks like the Astros are in the market for a starting pitcher, and that's why I have the Astros 7th in my list for Giolito.
Yeah, and I think in that case, like their bullpen is really good, but when you have like Framber Valdez, and then looks like Brown might be wearing down a bit, and you have some guys who haven't really been that full season type 6-month starter, like the 28 starts and beyond at the major league level, that you have to risk. Like, will our bullpen be burnt out in September? Will we have our full relief core when it comes to the postseason? And Giolito might be somebody who buys them time every start and just allows them to go like 6 and 7. All of a sudden, we don't need one reliever for one day. He gets an extra day of rest, and then that might make their postseason strategy a little bit more successful. So I can see them more than like a team like the Giants, which is just, they have innings from their starters enough right now. And it's more of a matter of just like, does the rest of their team fit? Are they getting by like on some surprising rookie performances? Are they getting by on like some, like kind of like the White Sox, like stringing together like hot 2 weeks and a hot, month and like really good defense at a time you can really use it. Like they're getting some surprising performances and stitching them together really well. But the Astros seem like they're built for now. They're built for, trying to get Dusty Baker, another one. They still have their offensive core there. They thought they're getting more from their rotation, like Urquidy being out, I think hurts. So I think they're still looking for somebody like him to fill in that rotation behind Valdez, and Giolito would slot in without costing them too much.
Number 6 on my list, and this may fluctuate. Like if I do this again next week, they may not even be in my list, or they could be higher on my list. And that's the New York Yankees. The Yankees have just lost back-to-back series against the Chicago Cubs and the Colorado Rockies. They're 50-44 in the season. That's tied with Boston for last place in the American League East, which I know White Sox fans. 50-44 would be feeling like running away with the American League Central right now. But the Yankees are tied with Boston for last place in the American League East. And since June 1st, the Yankees really have been playing like they're falling back here. They're the only team in the American League East with a losing record since June 1st. The Yankees are 16-20. That's why if I do this again next week, I don't even know if the Yankees will be on this list. Because when you look at their starting rotation, Garrett Cole's having a great season. 1.48 ERA+. Carlos Rodon has returned for the Yankees. He's made 2 starts so far for the Yankees. All the other starting pitchers, including the one that just threw a no-hitter, perfect game, I should say, no one else is above league average for the Yankees rotation. And it is pretty glaring when you go on Baseball Reference and you just look at ERA plus that it's Garrett Cole and then 4 below league average starters. And the position here, as far as the Yankees being 6th on this list, like the Yankees, Jim, either need to be very aggressive at this deadline, or I could see them not participating at all and just sink their way out of contention in 2023. I don't think that would be a smart move on Brian Cashman's part, but who knows if he's even coming back if the Yankees don't make the postseason this year. But it is a troubling situation in the Bronx, and I have them 6th on this list because if they are aggressive, then yeah, they're still trying to figure out what they got in Carlos Rodon as he breaks off the rust, but having Lucas Giolito as part of the rotation be a more dependable number 2 guy behind Garrett Cole. And if Rodon does recapture the magic, well, then you got Cole, Rodon, and Giolito.
Yeah, I think they have the problem the White Sox have in that they need to score runs. Their offense is terrible. Like, they just fired their hitting coach. They hired Sean Casey from the TV to see if he could reignite their offense. And, looking it up, since the end of May, they have a 281 OBP.
Yeah.
214 batting average. Like, they're slugging okay, but Aaron Judge being out, like, that doesn't help. So they might be looking at it, say, like, if we don't get anything from our offense, like, we see what the White Sox are doing, just like, ordinary, to decent pitching isn't enough to carry this team into a feasible, September threat, October threat, what have you. So that's why I think, I see them fading a little bit unless, this change to Sean Casey just is the kind of change of scenery type or threat to the system, rattles them to their core to shake them out of what they've been doing. But yeah, if they're not scoring runs, I don't see them preventing their way to postseason success. I think the run prevention has been fine already, not great, but their offense is what's killing them.
Moving on to number 5 on the list, and as we continue moving up the list, this is where I think you get a lot more serious suitors for Lucas Giolito. Number 5 on the list is the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're currently 52-42. They're 2 games back of the Dodgers. They would be the 6th seed in the National League. But they have lost 4 straight games. They just got swept by Toronto in Canada. The Diamondbacks have lost 8 of their last 10 games. And since June 1st, the Diamondbacks have been playing .500 baseball. And when you look at their starting rotation, Zach Gallen, great season, 136 ERA plus. Merrill Kelly is having a good season for the Diamondbacks. He's at 133 ERA plus, even though he's been dealing with some nagging injuries, but he should be returning soon for the Diamondbacks. And Tommy Henry's been a pleasant surprise for the Diamondbacks. He's got a 114 ERA plus. But I have the Diamondbacks 5th on the list because they're trying to keep up with the Giants and Dodgers, Jim. And behind them, breathing down their neck, the Philadelphia Phillies, which the Phillies are playing some of the best baseball in Major League Baseball. I think they have the 2nd best record since June 1st. Unfortunately, the best team since June 1st has been the Atlanta Braves. The Phillies are not making any ground on the Braves, but they are making ground on everyone else right now. I believe they're like 25-12 since June 1st, the Phillies. So you got the Phillies breathing down the Diamondbacks next. Cincinnati is still in the mix in the wild card as they're chasing the Milwaukee Brewers in the NL Central. It's a tough spot for the Diamondbacks, and I don't think they could sit still during this trade deadline. So that's why I think, even though Tommy Henry's been a pleasant surprise, adding Giolito to the front 3 of their rotation might be enough to either outlast the Giants or surprise everyone and win the National League West.
Yeah, they're another team that they have a lot of places they can add, but also like a lot of places where they can stand pat because they have their outfield's been a little bit disappointing outside of Corbin Carroll, and maybe they can move. Alec Thomas hasn't quite figured out. Jake McCarthy was, hot last year and has some skills, but also just isn't producing a ton yet. Like, they have some guys that can maybe move to improve the offense. So I wonder if that's where they look, but they're scoring some runs as well. Like, they're not terrible offensively. They just have like the studs and duds type situation to where like they have some obvious holes, but some young players who are seemingly coming into their own and not floating by in a flash and pan. Although I didn't realize how good of a season Evan Longoria was having, like out of nowhere. Like, I thought he was mostly done and kind of getting ready to be like on the Hall of Fame ballot based on the way he just like couldn't quite stay healthy with the Giants. But no, he's like the anti-Madison Bumgarner in terms of like staying, like producing while fading. Like he's declining, but it's mostly in terms of just how available he is, not necessarily in how well he plays when he's available. Whereas Bumgarner was available, but just terrible. So I think, maybe they're still looking at, maybe a veteran presence in the rotation to offset what they did not get and never really got in Bumgarner. And maybe it helps, but I can see them improving in other ways to where, like, if they're going to use a limited amount of resources to improve this current team, they have a lot of ways they can go.
There are more fits for Lucas Giolito. We'll take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but next we talk about the top 4 best fits for Giolito. Beyonce is coming to Chicago next weekend. Did you get your tickets yet? Or how about Ed Sheeran, who arrives in Chicago July 29th? The biggest acts are visiting Chicago this summer, on top of all the baseball games and other great concerts, theater shows too. It can be quite the chore and headache trying to secure tickets to all of these great events. Buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. Use Game Time to purchase your tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee helps eliminate stressing over tickets. If you find tickets in the same section and even row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's why Game Time is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. Download the Game Time app on your phone, create an account, and get $20 off your first purchase using our promo code Sox Machine. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform that you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because Indeed does the hard work for you. They show you the candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your description immediately after you post so you can hire faster. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports, and support the show by saying that you heard it on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. So we went through teams 8 through 5 on my top 8 list, best fits for Lucas Giolito. Let's talk about the number 4 team. And I have the Tampa Bay Rays as the 4th team, best fit for Lucas Giolito. They're currently 60-36. They are suddenly just 1 game ahead of Baltimore. Their torrid start to the season since June 1st has really slowed down. The Rays are 20-18 in their last 38 games. They have lost 7 of their last 10 games. They are getting some good news. Shane McClanahan, their ace, is returning from the injured list as he'll face Texas on Monday night. What a tough test that is to come off the injured list. McClanahan's having a fantastic season. His ERA plus is 162. He's clearly the ace of the staff for the Rays. Zach Eflin, questionable free agent signing. I don't think, including myself, didn't know what the clear direction was of the Rays signing Eflin, but he's having a very good season, just as good as Giolito at 126 ERA plus. And then Tyler Glasnow has returned to the Rays, and he's putting up big strikeout numbers, and he's currently at 109 ERA plus. But the Rays are still throwing quite a bit of bullpen games, and Glasnow is barely averaging more than 5 innings per start, Jim. So they're not getting deep starts in 2 of their days every 5th day. Adding Giolito, I think, could help solidify their starting rotation while giving Kevin Cash 4 dependable starters for the postseason. I know Cash loves to keep starters on a short leash and use the bullpen during the postseason, but I think adding Giolito would be a good depth idea in case McClanahan does have any injury hiccups or somebody else goes onto the injured list, because you have some high-risk injury guys here. Adding Glasnow to that conversation, where I think Giolito could help solidify that rotation for the Rays.
I think Blake Snell is nodding vigorously at your notion of Kevin Cash's strategy. I think, like with the Lance Lynn talk, I think that represents what kind of ambition the Rays might have. If they feel like between Eflin and Glasnow and McClanahan that we have our 3 postseason starters down and we just need innings from the guy we acquire, then I can see it being, we'll get Lance Lynn and we'll get like a bullpen arm nobody thinks is good and all of a sudden is throwing the 8th inning for us in October and we'll be fine. What's curious to me, or I think might affect the calculus a little bit, is like, we mentioned the Yankees being in the mix. There's also another AL East team that could be in the mix. So if they get into an arms race, whereas, if the Yankees or the Orioles or what have you get like Stroman, or if they're knocking on the door for like Jordan Montgomery or something, then I could see like them saying we need to ante up a little bit because all of a sudden, like, our seating might be shot if they catch up. So that's one case of just, the NL West is one and the AL East is another, of just having multiple teams competing with each other that might just force a little bit of one-upsmanship, or at least keeping up with the Joneses, to make sure that they just lost the division or lost home field advantage or had to press all of their important players into heavy action in September because they sat on their hands at the deadline.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jim. And that's my concern for Tampa Bay. They've been to the World Series twice. They've never won it. And I feel like this is their best chance of winning a World Series in their franchise history. They played such great baseball out of the gate. And yeah, they have struggled as of late. But offensively, just their position players, there's no real standouts other than like Randy Arozarena and Wander Franco. But they just play well as a team. And on the pitching side, that's where I just have a concern for the Rays, is that getting to the finish line, they didn't have to worry about that a month ago, but now they really do have to worry about it because the Baltimore Orioles have caught the Rays in the American League East standings, and I think that is a big surprise to folks around Major League Baseball. Speaking of Baltimore, they are number 3 on my list for Lucas Giolito. The Orioles are red hot. They have won 8 straight games. They're 57-35. Since June 1st, they are 22-14. When you look at their starting rotation, like offensively, we know how good Baltimore is. They are one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball. That is a scary unit. Their starting rotation, Tyler Wells is having a good season for the Orioles. You may not know who he is. Kind of an unknown, but he's got a 1.31 ERA plus. Kyle Bradish is having a good season. He had a good start on Sunday. Before that start, he has a 1.26 ERA plus. And then there's questions in the back half. Dean Kremer is 10-4 on the season, but he's got a 4.59 ERA. He's got a 91 ERA plus. He's a below league average starter. The Orioles announced that they're moving Cole Irvin, who they acquired in the trade deadline last year from Oakland, back to the bullpen. They're going to give the young guy, Grayson Rodriguez, which we got a chance to see him in Chicago earlier this season, but he's been really inconsistent. And then there's the veteran Kyle Gibson, who's got an 88 ERA plus, and I just feel like he gives up too much contact to trust him in the postseason. I implore Baltimore, Orioles fans, I know you are on me because even though I prefaced that I said this is probably a bad trade idea on Twitter, on an offer for Dylan Cease, I implore Baltimore to add a significant starting pitcher. I believe this offense, Jim, is good enough to make a similar run like Philadelphia did last year, in which the Phillies won the National League pennant. And while Wells and Bradish have been quite good this year, I'm worried about the Orioles in the postseason if they're turning the ball in Game 3 to Kyle Gibson or Dean Kremer. Because they have an excellent bullpen. But man, if they don't get deep starts, this bullpen could get gassed early in the postseason. And that could really impact their chances of winning the American League pennant and reaching the World Series. And I think Giolito would greatly help solidify the front end of their rotation.
We talked about Baltimore during the offseason. We both had Carlos Rodon going to Baltimore because of that need for like just a dude at the top of the rotation that they didn't have. And, seeing what happened with Rodon and his back and just barely becoming available now for the Yankees, they dodged a bullet there. But I think the need holds, and, it kind of, you risk of being like, you still need a starter, even though they're doing great without a name brand rotation. They're doing just fine. But yeah, we've seen it before, just bullpens getting burned out. And, they have just prospect after prospect coming up. They have, more in the tank. But I mean, like, they don't need, they have some depth to deal from, and not just, Jackson Holiday, but I mean, like, their top 5 is good. Like their top 10, like, just, disappointments would fit really well in the White Sox system with the way they just, how high their standards are for compelling prospects. So it would seem like they're in a prime position to make a deal. And maybe that just puts them in a prime position to be really picky about, the pitcher they acquire. But it would seem like this would be the time. And now that they've seen that Giolito's healthy versus, like, can Carlos Rodon actually, like, hold up for a full season? And then will he be able to do it again and again and again over 6 years and at a premium? Like, this is a case where we can get the starter we need for the time we need them without overpaying. So I think they make more sense maybe than they did, like, for the kind of 5-6 year starter, $100+ million contract that they were, that they were able to avoid with no harsh consequences this time around, and like shop smarter and shop at a more targeted time frame to maximize their chances for this year. And then, after the season, reassess, like, how much rotation help do we need, and then take another swing at the free agent market or trade from their deep farm system to find that guy.
I would just like Baltimore, even if they don't get Giolito, Blake Snell, Marcus Stroman, they got to get someone. Like, I implore them to do this. Like, I feel like in Baltimore, the future is bright. So if it doesn't happen this year, no worries. We'll be there next year. Well, let me give you a perspective from the White Sox, in which we thought they were going to have a lengthy contention window. Nothing is guaranteed next year. And the way that this team is playing, especially offensively, I would say push more chips into the middle. Like, to your point, Jim, the Orioles have 9 top 100 prospects in their farm system, and many of them are in AA and AAA. Like, to your point, they are well stocked. They have intriguing young talent that could help them out depth-wise. But the vast majority of them are position players, and they are struggling on the pitching front. Maybe they don't flip any of their top prospects, but if they flip someone in the bottom part of the top 100 and they get a Blake Snell from San Diego or a Stroman from the Cubs or Giolito from the White Sox, shoot, they get 2 of those guys. Then I think everyone needs to take the Orioles more seriously in the American League as someone that could win the American League pennant, because on Fangraphs, they don't have great odds for the Orioles winning the pennant. But man, watching this weekend series against the Miami Marlins, I am believing in the Orioles. And I'm hoping that they take lessons learned from other rebuilds and don't sit on your hands because you think next year could be great as well. Give this a chance, because this might be your best shot of winning the American League pennant, because you're good now. You don't know if you're going to be healthy and everyone's going to be performing at this type of level next year. So I say go for it now if I'm Baltimore.
And I think, like, third-party baseball fans that have no direct rivalry with the Orioles, have no, like, concern for any of the AL East teams. Like, I think they could be, like, baseball fan sweethearts. Like, if we're going into the postseason and the Orioles are in it and there are no other teams I'm really concerned about, like, yeah, I'll go with the Orioles to win it all. Like, capitalize on what they have going. They're fun to watch. They have a lot of young talent. They're a team that graduated all their top prospects and still has top prospects left, whereas the White Sox graduated all their top prospects and had the just cupboard completely empty. They're proof that, like, there was a proper way to rebuild and an improper way, or like a half-assed way to do it. They did it the proper way, and now they're in a position to add, to add some money, and not even like Padres nuts, like Astros reasonably spending 170, 180 million, getting to that level and getting that kind of support. Like, I think you'd have baseball fans lining up behind them saying, yeah, the Orioles haven't won anything in a while. They have a fun young team, and they're not just flexing financial muscle to make it happen. Like, they're a model for other franchises. So yeah, go O's.
Last time they were in the World Series was 1983.
I believe so.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So you have a couple generations that have never seen the O's in the World Series. They've been in the postseason many times, but haven't won the American League pennant. in almost 40 years. So I implore Baltimore to be very aggressive over the next 15 days. Really add to your starting rotation. Don't sit on your hands. I think you got a better chance than others think of you guys winning the American League pennant. Moving to number 2, a team that I am expecting to be aggressive before the deadline, because, man, they are playing way better baseball than when we saw them in the hashtag 1018 road trip, and that's the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds having a difficult time with Milwaukee. They have lost 4 straight games, all against the Brewers. The Reds are 50-44. They're now 2 games back of Milwaukee, but since June 1st, they are 24-15, and their starting rotation... I chuckle a little bit. Andrew Abbott's been great in 8 starts for the Reds. He's got a 1.92 ERA+, but it's 8 starts. Ben Lively, he started on Sunday, but he only threw 57 pitches over 4 innings, and he had to leave the game due to cramping. And he's been good for the Reds. He's got a 1.23 ERA+, but their frontline starter, Hunter Green, has been on the injured list. He's got a 1.20 ERA+ this season, so he's been good, but he's not expected to rejoin the Reds until sometime in August. The Reds are a team with a clear need for starting pitching. They had a tough time scoring against the Milwaukee Brewers, but offensively, there's a lot of potential here for the Reds. I think the Reds not only need Lucas Giolito, but they could also use another starter in addition to Lucas Giolito. If there's one team in the majors that might be crazy enough to make a Lucas Giolito Lance Lynn trade, it could be the Cincinnati Reds. They really need help here, but this is an area where, back to that initial argument that some people think that Giolito would just be like a number 3 starter for contending teams. Here, I think you make the case that Giolito could be your game 1 starter if the Reds acquired him.
Yeah, I think maybe when it comes to the Reds, the one thing I wonder about when you look at their team success, they're a surprise. They're kind of a Cinderella story right now. But the thing that jumps out to me is they're being like severely out-homered. So I wonder when it comes to adding pitchers, adding position players, trying to figure out like how to bridge that gap, given that Great American Ballpark is such a hitter-friendly park, that I wonder if they're going to be looking for either super home run suppressors, or if they're going to be looking for bats, even more bats than they have, just to try to, even that tab a little bit. They've gotten a little bit better since, De La Cruz came up, but they still need to put a dent in that. Like Giolito's been okay at managing homers, but I could see him like going to, Cincinnati and not being so great at it and just getting by on like not allowing that many base runners and allowing a lot of solo shots. Lance Lynn, I don't think he would fit well at Great American Ballpark at all. So that's why I think 24 homers and 188 innings, like that's not going to cut it there. So I think they would need somebody who limits the kind of one swing damage. I think Giolito's fine at that, not great at, like Dylan Cease is somebody who is pretty good at that. And I think that's maybe like more along lines of who might help them more, but yeah, certainly they could use Giolito and, just the, another team that is getting by with like surprising bullpen performances. And you hope that they don't just run those guys, through the ringer in August and September. So they, whether they get to October or just done by October, like seems like they could use a little bit more from the rotation, just getting 6 and 7 innings on a more reliable basis.
Yeah, Robert Murray of Fansided, to your point about the Reds needing more home runs. Robert Murray on Twitter late Sunday night reported that the Reds' top prospect, Christian Encarnacion Strand, is being called up. So another of the top hitting prospects for the Reds will be joining the team. So they probably are thinking the same thing that you are, Jim. We need more power. So here they are. They're calling their top power prospect to join the team, especially after De La Cruz has already been on the team and Joey Votto is hitting out of the gate for the Reds as well. I still think they need help in the starting rotation. And it sounds like they are trying to get help in the starting rotation, and I think Lucas Giolito could do wonders for the Reds to help solidify that rotation, because, man, if they make the postseason with this rotation, you better hit. That's all I got to say. You better score some runs in the postseason. Finally, we get to number 1, my best fit for Lucas Giolito, and that team is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers are in first place in the National League West. They are 53-39, and since June 1st, they're 19-16. They did not get good news shortly after the All-Star break. Clayton Kershaw is out until August, as it was recommended by doctors to give his left shoulder extra rest. And Kershaw is having a fantastic season. He's got a 1.73 ERA plus this year, even though it's uncertain if he's going to be pitching in 2024. So we don't know if this is like the last hurrah in a Hall of Fame career for Clayton Kershaw, but he's going to be missing the rest of July here. While Kershaw's out, here's a Dodgers starting rotation. Julio Urias, which he's been uneven this year, but he's got a 1.01 ERA plus. Tony Gonsolin, which doesn't throw very hard, but he gets outs. He's got a 1.19 ERA plus. And this is where it gets shaky. Emmett Sheehan has been pitching well for the Dodgers, but it's only 4 starts. Bobby Miller, another of the Dodgers' top prospects, has made 9 starts. He's been about league average. And then Michael Grove's a swing man, and he is not league average. And that's the starting rotation for the Dodgers right now. They're first place in the National League West, which, folks in Los Angeles wonder often, like, how are the Dodgers going to get through a week with all the pitching injuries they've been dealing with? And I have the Dodgers number 1 on my list for Lucas Giolito because of all this uncertainty, Jim. They are in first place in the National League West, but there are serious challengers now with San Francisco and Arizona. And the Dodgers always have World Series aspirations, and on paper, I just don't feel like they got enough starting pitching to knock off Atlanta as the National League favorites. We don't know about the long-term status of Kershaw, and that's why I have the Dodgers number 1 on my list on who needs Giolito the most, because while I like Julio Urias and Gonsolin's been effective, until you know for certain what you got in Kershaw, like, Giolito would enter the Dodgers and be their best performing starting pitcher right now in 2023, and they could really use someone to give a boost to their starting rotation.
Yeah, it feels like the White Sox have used a lot of pitchers this year, and they've used 24 pitchers. The Dodgers have used 31.
Yeah.
So that's like an extra week's worth of pitchers.
First place.
Yeah.
I mean, great job of the position players, great job by the front office, great job by Dave Roberts managing through these very choppy waters. It's amazing to me that the Dodgers are in first place with all the injuries they are dealing with on the pitching front.
Yeah. So, there are 2 strategies they can go to. They have a lot of guys who they can sample for starts. Like you mentioned, Miller and Sheehan and Gavin Stone, they're all worthy of auditions. It's just more of a matter of are they content with auditions to get by, or, are they going to continue lining up all of their, resources and future plannings for Shohei Ohtani? Maybe they trade for Ohtani. Maybe they get a head start on maybe they do the Mookie Betts thing, just trade for him and then sign the rest of the year. So that's, I think, the one thing kind of getting in the way of the Dodgers for me is what are their Ohtani plans? Does Giolito get in the way in terms of luxury tax or anything they have to worry about there for adding his salary midway in the books? Or, just as a matter of they just jump Ohtani, given that the Angels are kind of falling out of it in a way that he might not have been available before.
Let me pitch this to you as informed speculation for our diehard podcast listeners. You know what we are talking about. Let's call this gossip for those that are not diehard. Do you think the White Sox, in particular Rick Hahn, would entertain an idea of Lucas Giolito for Michael Busch straight up?
I don't. The thing that Busch I don't quite, or I'm skeptical of, is can he play second base? Because it seems like he's getting further away from second base. Also, and you might be able to speak to this as a draft Nick, whereas I'm more of a casual draft follower, I'm automatically skeptical of any position players from North Carolina. They never quite seem to get there. When it comes the top first round draft picks, let me look at recently, because I know they've had pitchers hit on picks. But I'm looking at their recent draft picks, like Zach Allen, he's from North Carolina, great pitcher. Jacob Stallings has been meh, not bad, but he peaked, it seemed. Dustin Ackley was disappointing. Brian Goodwin was didn't quite get there. Colin Moran has been disappointing. Kyle Seager is the one position player, it seems who's actually capitalized on his draft stock and turned it into a real solid pro over the last 15 years. And everybody else has been more or less a roster filler and occasional starter, but not somebody you can really feel great about building around. So I think that those are my 2 points against Busch. I like the talent, like theoretically he's a left-handed batter who fits and can play an outfield spot and has some patience. Like he does address some of the White Sox shortcomings, but if he can only play like first base or left field, that doesn't really help. If he's, somebody who just, kind of the Dodgers get a lot of value from when he's in the minor leagues, but can't quite put it all together at the major league level. Those are my biggest points of being like, I don't think this is going to work out.
He's hitting well in AAA. I mean, he got a cup of coffee with the Dodgers this year, struggled in the major league level. He is raking in AAA, but yeah, to your point in the North Carolina, it's very uneven. You're going to hear a lot about Vance Honeycutt as being the top prospect of this upcoming draft because a lot of draft analysts just love how toolsy he is. I'm not one of those guys because I'm sorry, you can't be my number one if you hit 257 in college. Like, I don't care what your 60 run time is or your highlight reel defensively. If you are hitting 257 in college, like that is bordering 40, maybe 35 grade for contact. Like I need to see a lot more from Vance Honeycutt to convince me that he's the best prospect in next year's draft. But yeah, to your point, North Carolina definitely has that type of reputation that for some reason these guys get a lot of helium to their name, but they don't convert into the major leagues. But again, that's informed speculation, or we can call it gossip. But just one idea as far as on how the Dodgers and White Sox can make a move. But do you agree with my number one, Jim? Would you have the Los Angeles Dodgers as the team that not only would Giolito be a great fit for, but maybe has the most need for Giolito?
I think they're up there. I think I like the Dodgers, the Rays, and Orioles. I think the Reds just, maybe a year too soon are still trying to figure out who's sticking with, for the next year. And maybe, they shouldn't take it for granted, but the NL Central is pretty soft to where like they might feel like they want to make sure that they keep the right guys and that they have the right depth lined up before getting pressured into something. But I think, between the Dodgers having pressure on them and the Rays and Orioles and Yankees and even the Red Sox are like hot right now. That whole division is just putting pressure on each other to where like seems like those three can use a starter like Giolito, can even use them in the postseason, and that makes it worth it enough to deal from their considerable prospect depth.
I think doing this exercise, it tells me there's definitely a market for Lucas Giolito. Rick Hahn should be able to convert on this trade to bring back somebody worthwhile that helps the team maybe as soon as 2024, but for sure in 2025 and beyond. If he does not convert on this trade, we don't think highly as a general manager for Rick Hahn as far as his overall body of work in the last 10 seasons. But I find very little excuses to be able to convert on this particular trade. And even though it's a bit heartbreaking to talk about that, it's like certainty that Lucas Giolito is going to be dealt from the White Sox in the next 15 days. I think there's a pretty sizable market for Lucas Giolito. Teams have a clear need for Lucas Giolito. I'm expecting Giolito to be moved in the next couple of weeks at the very latest, and the White Sox should bring back something interesting for Giolito that could help out with the squad. I'd love to hear everyone's feedback on my top 8. Maybe you have a different top 8 list than I do. Post yours in the comments section of the Sox Machine page or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. You could also hit us up as well with your top 8 list or whatever number of teams you want to go with on Twitter at Sox Machine and at Sox Machine_Josh. Coming up next, let's preview the next series for the White Sox as they head to Queens to face the New York Mets. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. Now we shift gears talking about the trade market to the next series for the White Sox, as it'll be a Tuesday through Thursday 3-game series against the New York Mets. The Mets are 43-50 this year. They're 18.5 games back of the Atlanta Braves. They're 4th place in the National League East, and they're 8.5 games back of the wild card. Offensively, the Mets rank 20th in Major League Baseball in team OPS. That's a shocker, especially when you look at their roster. They have a .715 team OPS. Their staff ERA, they're 17th in Major League Baseball with a 4.36 ERA. The pitching probables for this series between the White Sox and the Mets, Lucas Giolito will take the mound on Tuesday going up against old enemy Carlos Carrasco. Wednesday night at 6:10 p.m. Central Time, the Mets made a change here. The White Sox are going to hand the ball off to Tuki Tuason, official starter for the White Sox in this game against old enemy Justin Verlander. And then Thursday, getaway day, it's a 12:10 p.m. Central Time start. It's Michael Kopech for the White Sox against old friend alert, Jose Quintana. Quintana is scheduled to make his first start of the 2023 season and his first start with the New York Mets on Thursday against his old team, the Chicago White Sox. But the big storyline in this series for the White Sox, other than the trade candidates, is Eloy Jimenez, Jim. Manager Pedro Grifol said that Eloy, who had to leave Sunday's game early because of a lower half injury, may need 3 to 5 days of rest, which puts him in doubt for this series. The White Sox probably won't put him on the injury list, so they're going to play shorthanded again, Jim, it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess, although, that doesn't really matter this time around when it comes to how far they are to where, yeah, sure. So Gavin Sheets has to play whole games now or something like that, but yeah, I just wish we could get to a point where we can watch Eloy run hard down the first base line and not cringe every time he lunges towards first base. I thought just when I started getting comfortable with oh, he's got some speed. Oh, he's making plays close. He's legging out some infield singles. I like this. He's able to supplement his good contact with the kind of lucky contact because he's got some athleticism back, and so much for that. He had 20, 25 games and then, legs go out and in again. So yeah, it's disappointing, but I was hoping he would be able to stay healthy enough through the trade deadline to maybe make him movable. I had that in the back of my head. Would the White Sox try to move him while he's still looking in peakish form for a team that might really want that upside? And unfortunately, that's probably out the window now.
Yep. And offensively, it's not that impressive of a season for Eloy. He definitely gets hot for a couple weeks and then, he cools off like a lot of major leaguers do, but his overall body of work is lacking. He's not hitting as well as he did last year. When he returned last year, he was really raking for the White Sox. It hasn't been consistent for Eloy, and it sounds like he might miss this series against the New York Mets. We'll see. Maybe he makes the start on Thursday against Jose Quintana, but it does sound like that Eloy is going to miss the first 2 games against Carlos Carrasco and Justin Verlander. Michael Kopech, what are you watching for in this start? Because he could not get out of the first inning against Atlanta in his last start.
First, I guess I'm looking to see if he even makes the start.
Yeah, true.
Which, given that he was really off in his control and was missing some velocity, it's hard to know, how much of that was having to throw 38 pitches in one inning when he has nothing working, is getting frustrated. A lot could factor into missing a tick, but also he had a shoulder problem and the White Sox didn't give him a rehab start. And it's funny, Mike Clevenger's been out for a month and he wants to get back in the rotation on the rehab start. One, no. 2, it's the White Sox. So yeah, probably they really haven't been real reasonable when it comes to just shoving guys back in the rotation. But yeah, it was scary, that start. Just when it looks oh, you're talking about 150 inning pace from Michael Kopech. And then, well, if he misses a start, he can still get to 140. Will he even get to 100? With the way he's throwing, the future for him in the rotation seems to be vanishing right now. If he doesn't get turned around pretty quickly, because if this is going to be a weeks long struggle, I suppose you could put him in the rotation next year. If you're really looking to just kind of reset some payroll and try to build up a next core by 2025, but you can't really have any hopes for him surviving a 6-month grind if it's 3 months in a row before losing his shoulder or his legs, the knee injury he had last year, losing his peak stuff and his command that makes it work. If that can't last a half season, then there really isn't a future for him in the rotation.
Yeah, his body doesn't seem want to hold up. And this is the terrible thing about professional sports sometimes, is that for athletes, their body betrays them. And it just seems with Michael Kopech, his body is betraying him. There are times, we have seen it even this year, where Michael Kopech could look like a frontline starter because he certainly has the stuff. But to your point, Jim, over the course of a 162 game season, he just really struggles to maintain and to stay healthy. And that's why, it fuels the conversation about moving Michael Kopech to the bullpen because that might be a better fit for him as far as on how his body can recover from appearances. Maybe he is better off just throwing 1-2 inning appearances than try to start every fifth day and throw 100 pitches and get through 5 innings. That's something to monitor for the rest of this season and definitely 2024. I think 2024 is going to be the last chance for Kopech to prove that he's a starting pitcher. If it doesn't work in 2024, then the White Sox, hopefully with some type of new leadership, would convince them to move him to the bullpen, or maybe you trade him to a team that has the idea of moving Kopech to the bullpen, and where I think he could be one hell of a reliever for any team in Major League Baseball. I mean, he was one hell of a reliever for the White Sox in 2021. It's just, it is a bit disappointing. Fingers crossed that nothing barks up on him, especially with his shoulder in this start against the Mets, if he does make the start against the New York Mets. But Tucson pitched really well in relief for Michael Kopech, so I'm glad that he's getting that start on Wednesday night. And to your point about Clevenger, I don't know when Clevenger is going to make another appearance for the White Sox. I still don't. I don't think we have clarity yet. I thought he was supposed to throw a bullpen in Atlanta, but I didn't hear on how that went.
Yeah, I'm happy for Toussaint that like he can at least get a 5-inning appearance or like plan accordingly for a 5-inning appearance versus like just being thrown into a game and like go as long as you can. You might not be ready for this. Like he looked gassed by the end of his 5 innings, in relief of Kopech, but he did okay. So I'm happy that like he's pitched well enough to where like, you deserve a full 5-day cycle to prepare for the opponent and prepare for a pitch count, have your bullpen day a couple days before, get everything lined up and actually give the White Sox like your best efforts when you're prepared versus like having to scramble to just give them something they can use.
And then finally, the Mets, what do you make of this team? I think they're going to sell. I don't think they're buying. One of the rare times to say this since Steve Cohen has bought the team, I don't think the New York Mets are buying at the trade deadline. But what do you make of this situation in Queens right now?
It doesn't seem like it's irreparable, but, given how much they invested in Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander and, kind of an older rotation to supplement like a offense that was, functioning pretty well with players in their prime or close to it. Like, it does seem like they are in a position to where like they, as much as they spent, they didn't necessarily overcommit, both because of like Cohen's deep pockets, but also like they knew that they're buying some high AAV guys, knowing that like this might be the end of them. Or like, they're like one pitch away from like their careers basically being over and going to the Hall of Fame. So as dire as it looks and as disappointed as Mets fans are, like it's not, I think they can get by with selling at the deadline and just being like, this team doesn't work, or Buck Showalter doesn't work. We're going to just reevaluate our roster and our management and so forth after the season and, still spend a buttload of money, but make it, to where like, it doesn't feel like it's just being piled on top of a model that doesn't seem to be working like that. That would be like throwing good money after bad, which is, I think they probably just want to shore up their roster enough and their like future forecast enough to where like it feels like they're throwing good money after good, or at least like untested that might be good versus so a little bit of staleness on the roster, I think.
Well, we'll see on how the Mets fare. Again, they've been really struggling, but they did win on Sunday. And we'll see if the White Sox can surprise again on this road trip. They've already surprised us once, beating the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta. Let's see if they can carry those good vibes. But every time I bring up good vibes and carrying over from series to series, the White Sox end up losing that next series. So we'll see how things go in Queens. And, of course, we'll be recapping these games and the White Sox wake-up calls and, of course, Sox Machine Live later this week before we preview the weekend series against the Minnesota Twins. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also watch our episodes on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. Those are also our Instagram and Thread accounts because Threads is a thing now, part of Instagram or Meta. I don't know how that works. I'm doing a little bit there. Not a whole lot, but I'm starting to get used to the platform. But if you are using Threads, you can follow us there at Sox Machine, and you can follow me at @SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work and want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content. They get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website, and when we have new Sox Machine swag, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball, and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.